Hey everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I am your host, Andrew Davis. And before I introduce my guest, I would like to remind everyone that you need to support and you need to financially support what you love, whether it is this show, my guest's comic, or corporate media. I personally do not care, but if you like something and you want to see more of it, you need to go out there and support it, because without money, it doesn't get made, and it doesn't matter, big, small, or indifferent. But enough about that. I don't want to bore you and cry about it and bitch about it all day long, because I have with me returning guest, comic creator Dan Schmidt. So welcome back to the show.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Love coming on your show.
Yeah, no, I like having you on. And you actually sent me your book, oddly enough, which very few people do. Very few people do that. And I don't get it. But, that's a different discussion for today, or maybe later on in this entire interview, we could dive into the concept. It's an R word. It's an R word, and it's not the word everybody's thinking of. It's relationships is the R word here. But enough about that, and maybe later we'll get into it, and we'll both get canceled. But anyhow, I do want to talk about your book, Worms Crawled In, because it is perfect for Halloween. You wrote it, you drew it yourself. I know you didn't print it yourself. I mean, you didn't do the actual physical printing of it, but you did self-print it in many ways. But what is the basic premise of this comic for those who are hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah. So looks like this, right? And it's about 160 pages, black and white interiors. And it's basically... there's a lot of books out there these days about zombies, right? And, the undead and things like that. So this is a different take on that. It's not really about zombies. There's no apocalypse. There's no end of the world, hordes roaming around and things like that. So I didn't try to be that. This is a more of a character-driven, like a supernatural story. So it's about Delane is the main character, who is able to see and hear ghosts, right? Spirits, dead spirits. So Delane runs into another, essentially a dead spirit, Marco, and they begin a quest to get revenge against a murderous criminal who is perpetrated against them both. So they go on this big long adventure, and so I was mentioning before about the relationship. So underneath all of that, it's really about people building friendship bonds and meeting new people and holding on to that. And how far would you go to help those friends that you really place value on in your life? So that's kind of what it's about.
I was talking about something completely else in the entire comic. That's all right. That's all right.
We read different books, right?
But even to go further into your book, because obviously a lot of stuff is going on, and you have a weird circumstance where you have Delane, who is a psychic, sort of a spirit medium, who is trying to make money. She's somewhat down on her luck in a lot of ways. And obviously, her friend gets murdered. I don't think that that's a spoiler by this crime lord. And I don't think she's necessarily out for revenge in the beginning of this book, but obviously Marco, who is a zombie undead, kind of a scumbag type of guy, also ran across this guy, and then the two of them somehow meet. And well, I don't know if I would call it revenge at first, but definitely they want justice. And then it becomes a real question of what type of justice, what does Marco want, and what is his version of justice, what is Elaine's version of justice. And also there's a question of truth as well. And so what was this like really building this up? Because we don't really get to that till the middle of this book. But then those questions start occurring, and then other things start happening, and then other, I guess, gears sort of get into play, I guess, and fit into the whole system.
Yeah. It's complex, I guess I would say, right? You were mentioning the different things that happen, the different gears that are moving, right? So it's starts off one way with an assumption of, like you said, revenge. And and as the characters grow, it turns more into sort of a redemption story, realizing those sins of the past and trying to find a way to make reparations, make amends for those things that you've done in the past, and then of course moving on with life. How do people do that? Which I think is a very common thing for us, for people to experience, right? We've all made mistakes in our past. We want to not be remembered for those mistakes and to try to grow as people. So this is a big part of that story.
Yeah, to even get into it, and obviously I don't know the full thing, and I don't remember everything about Delane and Faith's relationship, the girl who got murdered. But obviously they had a weird friendship to some degree, and I don't think we dive too much into that friendship, but we know that Marco was definitely a bad type of guy. He wasn't perfect, and he made a lot of mistakes, and he had a lot of issues, and so he also has a very interesting redemption story. And I think also for Delane, it's very much a closure. And I find it very biblical in a lot of ways. And so obviously it's super interesting in that regard. But there's also the idea that you're also eliminating a crime lord at the same time, and you're getting justice. And so it's super interesting because it's kind of like they are getting something for themselves. I think for Delane, it's very much closure. For Marco, he's trying to free, I guess, his brethren of the people who are trapped as a last act. And then, well, obviously, Delane wants the truth too, because and the way I view things, and this is just, I think biblical, and it's also, I think, just practical sense, the truth doesn't change an outcome, but it makes an outcome sometimes easier to, I guess, temper and then storm and weather, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
And it makes it easier to move on once you know. It's kind of like if somebody's been missing and then the body's found of them, the hope is gone, but it also allows for the next stage to occur.
Yeah, that's an interesting part of human psychology, right? Is regardless of if you can change an outcome, you just want to know. We all want to
It's
know.
finalization, I think, is the word.
Yep. Yeah, having that closure.
Because that's what you really touch upon, I feel, in your graphic novel. And it's a very interesting concept, because me and Pat Shand, I don't know if you saw that interview, we were in the middle of that talking about the idea, do you deserve an end to a story? And I think it goes to the idea of finalization. And that's how I view your graphic novel in a lot of ways, is that it's definitely touching upon the idea of finalization. And I think that's something that some people say, I don't want a story to ever end. But there is a point when a story ends that it's like, cool, we're done here. And look, it's always fun to rewatch it. It's always fun to have a side story. I mean, I go through the idea of One Piece here, where One Piece is going to end, but it's going to be nice that for the next 25 years, we're going to be getting One Piece movies that don't necessarily end the story, but they end the story, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of good examples of that being successful, right? Like people criticize the big two in the superhero books, right? Because to your point, they never end, right? They just always keep going. Even after what Spider-Man and all those are made in the 60s, 50s. That's a long time to try to keep a character in that story going and to keep it interesting. Whereas, you look at the huge success that things like manga have gotten. And a lot of those stories are within, I mean, some of them are very, very long, but they're within a volume, right? They're a set of 10, 15 books in some cases, maybe more. But they kind of have a beginning and an end. You look at like the Disney stuff with Star Wars and what they're doing, those Star Wars original movies had beginnings and ends, but they're able to continue the universe, the lore with other stories. So even though those Star Wars movies have an end, there's all this other stuff going on. So there's lots of different kind of examples of how those dynamics work, which is really interesting to see how people accept that and react to it.
Yeah, because it's just very interesting, because obviously, I mean, this is self-contained, your graphic novel, but it's also the story is self-contained too. And even just the thought of it, and one of the major concepts of it, Obviously there's the concept of justice is in there, the concept of revenge, the concept of closure, but also the concept of finalization. And also the idea that I need finalization to move onward. Because once something is still open, it's kind of like if you have an open wound, you might get stitches into it and then, well, it's going to heal up. Doesn't mean that the wound doesn't hurt. It just means that now we can go on to stage 2 or stage 3. And
Sure.
you can tell that with Delane in particular. She obviously is having issues with moving on. And this is her ability to move on. And so it's just so interesting how it's very neatly tied up and how the book itself, there's not a number 2 out yet. And I don't know if you want to do a number 2 because that's a whole nother question as well. Because sometimes things are better left untouched when you have something that's done right. And sometimes going back to the well, it challenges credibility to some degree. You could also mess it up even more. And
Are you saying this was done right?
I'm saying if you go back, you might fuck it up. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Touching on what you had mentioned about endings, right? The end, having that finalization. It's also fun to play around a little bit with what the expectation is of the reader, right? We've all seen so many movies and so many stories, read so many stories. And to be fair, a lot of those stories begin, middle, and end kind of the same. We are just as humans, we are set to recognize patterns and put out those same expectations. So when there's a chance to kind of twist the ending a little bit, people really like that, and it's fun to do. So
yeah, and let's even talk about that too, because obviously we're at a stage where everything has been done and then it has been done again in society. It is very rare that a new concept comes out. And obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong, you back a bunch of Kickstarters, you go to a comic shop at least once a month, or you order online, your local or your internet comic shop. I don't really care. I view them as the same. And then obviously you read comics. I read a lot of graphic novels. I have a Comixology subscription. So I'm probably reading about 15 to 16 graphic novels, some new stuff, some old stuff, some stuff in the middle. And at this point, everything has been done. And maybe 20 times out of the year, if I read 200 graphic novels, I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that to happen. Or, okay, they took a different take than what was traditional. Or, oh, this graphic novel's is off the beaten path.
Sure.
But a lot of stuff, I would say about 80% to 90% of what I read, it's predictable. It's not bad. It's just that, okay, I see the pattern. I get what's going to happen. I don't call it 100%, but I'm like, I know what the theme is of these 6 issues are.
Right.
And so what is that like for you? Because I think that's something that at this point, you're saying, look, I need something that's different, or I need to be absolutely spot on predictable and then just turn that up to an 11. There's no middle ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, as a creator, as a fan, I understand what you're saying, and that's where the fun is in creating, right? I think we all, like we mentioned, have a kind of a set idea of how these stories are going to go. We've seen them so many times. So knowing that as a creator, that gives us all the creators an opportunity to kind of change that tune. If you know that this has been done 100 times, that that, what do they call it? The hero's story, the hero's journey. We know how that works. So knowing that, we can change it, we can tweak it, we can make it more interesting, or put something in it that's unexpected. So we have that ability. And as a fan, personally, I'm pretty picky about what I read. One, from a financial standpoint, right? Like you said, 200 stories in Comixology can go by really quickly. So I like to try to get reviews, hear people talk about it, to see if something is valuable and worth my time reading, because I have a stack of books and I still haven't gotten through them. So to add another another book onto that stack, it's got to be pretty good.
What's happened to me is that I bought a subscription to Comixology for $6.37.
Yeah.
And so now I'm not getting everything, but I have access to so much material, and it's all digital because I've gotten to the point where I don't have any room. And that's where I'm at. And so it's not that. And look, if I love a story, I'll buy it. So if I like something digitally and then I'm like, man, that was a great Thor story, right? And this is like, I wound up doing that with a bunch of books actually that were Hulk related, where I'm like, man, these stories are great, and I wound up buying them. And I've done it with a bunch of Zenescope stuff because I'm like, oh man, I really want this in my collection. But and I don't even read them; I just have them. It's a very weird concept. But then there's a book like Cat Shit 1 that I've read digitally, and it's just a beautiful book. And I'm like, I have to buy this book because it's Cat Shit 1. It's a brilliant book, and it's a brilliant manga / comic. But the whole thing is that for me is that I don't feel so guilty anymore. And the reason why I'm reading 200, graphic novels, not 200 issues, 200 graphic novels. I mean, it's a different ballgame. Is if I don't like it mid-issue, I'm like, fuck it, I'm out. I just take it off my library. It's all digital, no harm, no foul, and I move on. And it allows me the ability to actually read a lot of stories and have less pressure. But again, it also allows me to spot a bunch of patterns. I mean, it's not that hard to realize that you could take Sonic the Hedgehog, overlay with Batman, take away the character traits of both Batman and Sonic the Hedgehog, and they are legitly about an issue and a part away from each other. And then if you added a few more lines in there that with some guns in there, you have a whole interesting book where you could have a shooting, killing hedgehog in a gangster city. it's a terrible idea. But if you actually start reading it like that, it's crazy. But I digress.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I do the digital thing when I can. And to your point, I think it's fun having that physical book, right? Like when you like something and you're like, I think I'm going to own this, right? This is how, not just for comics, but people do this all the time. People who love reading books have hundreds and hundreds of physical books in their house because they just like to have them.
I'm a physical book guy. The thing is, though, is that for instance, I just read a book called The Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
Weird book. If you know what the Black Dahlia is, it's a messed up case in Los Angeles. Seriously, I mean, it's brilliant. I'm not going to go into the details here. It's horrifying. And they still haven't figured out what the hell happened. There's been all this documentaries on it. It's great. Graphic novel, fantastic graphic novel. But guess what? Barnes and Noble or Midtown Comics or Amazon will have it. But even still, I can't go find that book locally. And I didn't know if I was going to like it. So if I could try something digitally, and then I wound up buying it later on because I loved it so much. But that's the thing, is that I didn't know if I was going to like it, right? So that's how I view it, is that I think people are like me in many ways, where if they love something digitally, then they'll go out and they'll buy it later on. So, I mean, it's the same thing with like Zenescope. Zenescope has so much material in 17 years that there's no way in hell that I can buy every single Zenescope graphic novel. But I can read out of their library, and I'll buy a lot of Robin Hood and Van Helsing, but I'm not going to go out and buy, some weird thing that, like, I'm not going to go buy, Neverland from Zenescope. It's just that there gets to a point where it's too much money and too much space.
Yeah, you were mentioning about comic shops before, and I can imagine how it's difficult for comic shops these days too. Like, there's so much content out there right now. There's a lot of content. There's no way they can stock all that stuff on their shelves and make a profit off of it.
I'm going to even challenge you a little bit even further on that. There's so much content beyond comics. So you can make the argument that in comics there's so much content. We could narrow the argument down, or we could expand it, because in my view, right now I'm competing against everything. Technically speaking, for airtime, I'm competing against the NFL, Major League Baseball. I'm competing against every other show on YouTube. I'm competing against Netflix. I'm competing against the repeats of The Office, repeats of Big Bang. I'm competing against every comic writer who has a book out there. I'm competing against every author. And I'm competing against people who want to sleep or want to drink a beer because they had a really bad day at work. Okay? And that's just 10 guys.
Is that us later?
That's 10, okay?
Yeah.
I'm competing against the guy who wants to play on his Xbox or his PS5. Again, it's complicated, let alone, but even to narrow the argument to go to you, I mean, I don't know how a comic shop does it. I have no idea because it is so massively complicated, I feel. And there's just too many books.
Yeah.
There's too many at this point.
So that's where digital shines, right? Exactly to your point. There's no limit to the library. You can have 5,000 books or more in a digital library somewhere, and you can just pull them down and read them as you like. And then, like you said, if you like it, hopefully these fans go out and buy the physical book if they like the digital copy, if they like the story. They just want to add it to their collection, right? The big bookcase in their house.
So let me ask you even about that, because I don't know how you feel about this, but even to go on that, I have become very selective what I want to own physically. I've done this with anime, with Blu-rays. I'm a big anime fan, so there's certain things that I will buy in Blu-ray, even though it's readily available. It's not because, and then I sometimes watch it on Blu-ray, sometimes I don't. But also what I think has happened too is that we've learned a very valuable lesson in the last week and a half about Bleach with Disney. That got taken off of Crunchyroll, and there's some people who say, look, I don't have Disney, I don't want a Hulu, I'm already streamed out, and now I'm not going to be able to watch Bleach. And so, but if you owned all of Bleach on Blu-ray, you could watch it at any point. Not to mention that some people say, look, I want to own this anyway, so I own Dragon Ball Z in Blu-ray. I could watch Dragon Ball Z openly on Crunchyroll. So I'm very curious about you and how you feel about that. Where do you think that people are thinking about it more, saying, look, I just want it on my shelf because I like it so much, or saying, hey, look, this thing can disappear or get picked up? Because I think that's starting to occur in my world, where people are starting to say, oh, I get it. This stuff is not permanently on these sites unless it's, Netflix owns the series, for instance. But even still, Netflix at some point might sell a series to Disney.
Yeah. This is, I think it's a generational thing, right? So if you are from an era where you're used to having physical things, digital is a convenience. If you are, let's say, a younger person and you grew up with digital, that's what you know, then physical things seem like a waste. You can just get it anywhere you want. To your point, I have had a Comixology subscription, made a lot of use of it. I liked it. Then Amazon kind of acquired, they had Comixology before, but they absorbed it into Kindle, and I'd never touched it since then. All those digital books that I bought or downloaded, they're still there. I could log in and get them, but I don't use the Comixology anymore. So to me, they're gone. Regardless of the platform, if I go to Global Comics, right, it's the same thing. It's a digital platform for comic books. I could pull a bunch of stuff there. If for whatever reason I don't go back to it, then all that stuff that I read is gone. You could get it somewhere else, I guess. I have the same problem with movies, right? There's Disney Plus, there's Hulu, there's Netflix, there's Amazon Prime, there's all those different things. So, you hear of a movie or something you want to watch. Well, shit, I don't have that platform. So now I either have to go buy the platform for that one movie, or, what do you do? This is the struggle of the digital age, is trying to figure out, navigate all these different ways that things are offered. And then do I want to participate in this phenomenon of having 10 different services?
It's very interesting because I don't have a Disney Plus account. I own Disney as a shareholder. Full disclosure, I'm planning to buy a lot more. I love Disney. It's the issue becomes is that I have Netflix, I have Peacock, I have Crunchyroll, and I have WWE Network on Peacock, and I have IWTV. I don't have time for Disney. I'm at the point where I don't have time for it. So I don't feel like spending $10 for something that I'm going to watch for 6 hours once a month.
Yeah.
It doesn't make economic sense at most. And look, I would love to watch Kim Possible and the American Dragon Jake Long, and watching, other things like She-Hulk would be great, and watching, all these Marvel movies that are fantastic. Like, I love Spider-Man No Way Home. I also loved when he went back home, but that's not the point. But the whole thing is that I'm out of, I guess, time. And that's the other thing too, is that, I mean, Peacock gives me The Office, and when I'm having a rough day, everybody, I sit back and I watch The Office for like 3 hours. Because it's not even that, it's enjoyable, but I'm also doing this show. I'm doing other things too.
Yeah.
So I don't have time, and I'm an anime guy. So I'm watching a lot of anime, and that's the other thing that I think people don't understand either, is that there gets to a point where it's just time is, there's only so much of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of it.
So speaking about that and getting back to your book, I mean, one of the things is that obviously your book is at least a year old, if not longer or older, and it's been out for a while. But I know that you produced the entire thing by yourself, where
Yes.
you wrote the script, you drew it. I think you inked it, or you might have just straight out did it in inks. I don't know the full extent of that. I think you did the lettering,
Yep.
right? Or
Yep.
was there something you didn't do on the book?
To what you said earlier, I didn't print it.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. Yeah, it's a lot. Took me like 3 years to actually put the book together. Like I said, it's probably about 145 or so pages of straight story. And then, of course, there's the extra pages in there whenever you make a book. So it took me a very long time to put it together. Nice thing about graphic novels or stories, like you mentioned, that have an end, is that you can keep selling it, right? You don't have to stop, or you're not hindered by monthly releases or things like that. You can buy it. Doesn't matter if it when it came out in October 2020, you could still buy it today, and it's just as good.
We're going to talk about that, because I think this is a big problem in the comic industry that people don't get. But I want to table that for 1 second, so make sure I remind me if I don't ask the question. But even talking about doing it all yourself, because I think people have a misconception that, you're doing it all yourself, and that, it must be cheaper, and there are advantages. And look, there are advantages. If you can draw and write in comics, you do have an advantage, because you don't need to go hire a team. But people also have to realize that you're not paying yourself either. And so there you go. So you don't need to raise capital. It is time. It is effort. I run this show by myself. And people think, because I run this show by myself, that you don't need to throw me money. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do whatever. No, it's expensive, because it's my time. It's my effort when I'm editing or building out graphics. That all takes time. And so what is that like for you? Because it is definitely saving you money, but people don't understand that you have a day job, or if there's another gig, it gets delayed in comics. Yeah. Or, getting those extra few pages, you're not going out to dinner, or you're not watching the football game on Sunday, you're cranking out another 6 pages. And I think people have a very misconception of that.
The work that's involved is significant, of course. Just from the standpoint of, in order to do all of those jobs, you have to know how to do the jobs. So you have to learn and practice and teach yourself how to do those jobs. So that alone is an investment of time and effort. To your point, producing the book, same thing. Just because you're doing everything doesn't mean that it goes faster. In the opposite way, it goes slower. I have to write the story to make sure that the script is good. I don't just do pages and then hope they all kind of run together at some point in the future. I go through the process of making a very good script, the best that I can, and knowing that it's good before I start the art. And then, of course, I start the drawing. I do the inking, the penciling, the gray tones myself. I do the lettering myself. So it all has to be done in stages. The advantages of doing a book the traditional way, the comic way, is that ideally you can pass those pages off to the next person in the factory, so to speak. So they're all being kind of done at the same time, right? Your penciler's penciling a page, passing it to the inker, who's passing it to the letterer, XYZ. So there's a assembly line kind of thing going on there. When you do it yourself, there's no assembly line. You are the success, you are the blockage, you are kind of everything. So I think it requires a lot of discipline for people to do it this way. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of satisfaction too, knowing that this whole thing, I put all this effort and time into it. Makes a difference.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, where, just on a capital level, and not
Yeah.
talking about paying yourself, but even on a capital level, I mean, obviously,
Yep.
it's just your time. Now, everybody has a different worth.
Right.
For
It's not just time. Time's valuable. Time is money, right?
you get what I'm saying about capital,
Yeah.
where you don't have to go and pay your artist, and the only
Oh, yeah.
risk, if you're doing, and you can do it yourself and you can draw, the only risk is that it's your loss of time, because you don't have any money out of your pocket. And what I mean by that, beyond your valuable, what your normal hour rate would be if you were charging somebody to do it.
Sure. Yeah. I
But
could not have made this book if I had to pay people. It wouldn't have happened. It's
it's the same thing with
145, 160 pages, and you figure the page rates for people. There's a reason. I'll be perfectly honest. There's a reason it's black and white. It's expensive to make comics. Exactly to your point. If you're hiring somebody, right? I can do the artwork. I can do the line work. I can do the lettering. I'm not great with colors. Coloring is hard. That's a whole side topic. It's a lot harder than people think it is. It's not just like grabbing crayons and filling in lines like a coloring book. It's hard work. I respect all those colorists out there. And they deserve to be paid for the beauty that they bring to a book with the way that coloring is done these days. So I wouldn't be able to color this book. I wouldn't be able to do that because it's expensive, and it rightfully should be.
Yeah, and even going into that, I mean, one of the things that people talk about is sustainability in comics, and obviously, my background, in case anybody hasn't actually looked up what I do, obviously, I have a day job, but I'm what is known as a comic book investor. I buy, sell comics, and there's a science to this, and there's a whole discussion, and what I'm trying to get people to actually understand in comics is that, okay, this isn't going to last forever. And your book, you might sell $50,000 on Kickstarter. You might pull in 10. And okay, what are you doing with that 10K to make you more money that's not in comics and create diversification? And this is what people, I think, in comics don't understand, is that, do you want to be sustainable? And that's a real issue. And I think a lot of creators are sort of stupid in that realm. I think that they think that this is going to last forever, and it's not. And I'm going to use some big names here. I think Scott Snyder is hopefully well divested, but there's going to be a point where he loses, not credibility, but popularity. It's going to happen. He might then come back 3-4 years later, have a great book, and it might be fine, but there might be a dip in his career. It happens to a lot of people. Look at a guy like Chuck Dixon. Look at a guy like Howard Mackey. I could keep naming people. It happens because it's just the flow. It's not a talent problem. It's just that sometimes witches are hot, and sometimes vampires are hot, and then sometimes romance gets out of control for 3 years, and then sometimes Superman's the hottest book on the planet. And if you're not in that, I guess, lane, you might do okay, but you're not doing as well. So I think this is something that is very interesting. And that's, I think, one of the biggest advantages being able to draw and write, is that it allows for more sustainability, I think.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It happens. It's natural. How the industry changes like that. I've heard stories about when the 90s look, right, all those 90s books and artists and stuff like that, but then you had all these really popular artists from the 80s, and when the 90s craze hit, a lot of those people struggled because a lot of the comic publishers were saying, hey, we want this style, this is hot right now. So yeah, it's unfortunate that people get pigeonholed like that, and then at the change of the winds, they could be in real hard times. Happens to everybody.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing. And obviously, I think we're going to go through an economic shift in the next 6 months in this country. I think that, I mean, Ray Dalio, and I'm big into stocks, said that we're going to have negative growth and it's going to be negative returns for 5 years. Now, it's Ray Dalio. It could be hyperbole, but I don't think it's outrageous to say that we're going to have a rough 6 months. Come the first half of 2023, I think that's pretty much, I don't want to say it's a lock, but I think it's a very probable position that 6 months in 2023 are going to be a very, very interesting, realm. And it very well be that comics are suffering a little bit too because of that.
Could be, yeah. I mean, you like the stock market. You've dabbled in it. It sounds like.
I'm very, very, very invested.
Yeah.
Leave
I
it at
mean,
that.
these trends happen, right? It's just how the market goes. It goes up, it goes down. The last 2-3 years were unprecedented in the stock market. Even the experts couldn't figure out what was going on, why things were going up and down the way that they were. And this gets back to the idea of the long-term investors, right? We're not just doing this for quick hits on a day or a week. You have to be in it for the long haul. You have to get the diversification you were talking about, whether it's in your talent in comic books or in the stock market. You got to kind of
that, and also bringing it back to this, and even what we were pausing for 1 second there with your book. And doing it. And this is the other problem that I think comic creators don't actually understand is that you want to create I guess a tree that produces fruit. You want to create a productive asset comic. This is how I like to call it, where it's a comic. And with graphic novels, if you write a good graphic novel or even an average graphic novel that is either seasonal or your book could be read at any given time, but your book really hits mid-September to about, probably the third week in October is the sweet spot for your book. And you can make a lot of money that way. I mean, you could easily pull in, 5-6 grand in a very short amount of time, but you could do that for the next 30 years. And this is what I think creators don't understand is that, and this is when you have a monthly release, for instance, great, your book is hot for 4 or 5 months, maybe 6-7 months after, but then you have to figure out how to market it all the time. You have to figure out how to push it out hard. You have to figure out that you are sort of tied to a publisher versus creating something that could be sold all year round and it does sell. And then you have a particular area where you can do very well in a very short amount of time. So what is that like? Because that's where the real money comes in, I feel, in comics, is the ability to have, maybe you got 2 months to sell a book, but you sell a lot of books. And then throughout the year, maybe you sell another 3 grand worth of the book. But if you're selling $30,000 worth of a book in 2 months, but again, it's already produced, it's already taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I like about the whole manga thing, right? Is exactly that. While there are serial aspects to it, it's kind of got a beginning, middle, and an end. And it doesn't matter if it came out, recently or 10 or 15 years ago. You can go still pick up the volumes, and they're just as good. You don't have to worry about, like you said, the monthly thing, or trying to get people interested. Word of mouth happens and kids go and they find these books because they're good and they're easily available. You can get them just about anywhere. So for me personally, as a creator, that's what I think is interesting. Not necessarily making the monthly serial books, but putting out just a book, right? It broadening the mind a little bit instead of just looking at how the Western comic area is working. Look at all the books, right? If you look at sequential art in general, Raina Tellemeier, I think is her name. I probably screwed up the last name. Does fantastic with serial, not serial, the sequential art books. She does graphic novels like aimed at youth and like teen. And she can sell them all the time. They're one and done books, right? and that's a great, to your point, advantage of doing those all in one stories is that you can carry it anywhere you want. You can sell it anywhere you want. You're not tied down by a history or things like that. So for me, I like that.
I also think that, you know, it's if it's well written, and this is where I think that people in comics mess up, right? I think a lot of people in comics are pursuing publishing deals, and I think that the answer is not to pursue a publishing deal, but why don't you figure out how to build your audience and then do it yourself, and then basically create it so that you're selling 40 of these books every single month. But then you have book A, you have book B, you have book C and book D, and you sell 40 of each type. You know, you now have something that's operating in perpetuity. That's the word I think that people mess up. Like, I'm a dividend stock guy. So every month I get my dividends for doing nothing. It's passive income. And now I've worked my ass off, and then I take money and I move money around. I sell things on eBay. I'm buying and selling comics. But again, I have basically created perpetuity. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that people in comics don't get is that when you produce a book, but you bring it to a publisher, you lose perpetuity in a lot of ways because they'll push it out for a little bit and you'll be in comic stores. But really, is that where the money's at? Or are you better off almost producing 10,000 copies of your book, going to cons, and handling it that way?
Yeah. Speaking of passive income, I just started getting merch on Redbubble for my book. I haven't really done that before, so this is new for me. But yeah, I can take images, pictures, logos, put them on products, and then I don't have to do anything. It can sell by itself. I don't even have to administer it. Which is interesting. I don't have to keep boxes in my basement and mail things out.
That's another thing.
It just goes.
There was a famous debate. I'm not going to say who, and this came up between two creators. It was a shit show. Very, very, very honest about it. And if people know what I'm referring to, you know what I'm referring to. But this Redbubble discussion came about. I have a Redbubble store, and I have bought images. I have bought T-shirts. I have designed, and I don't have to touch it. It's wonderful. And the reason why is that I can go and I can get it for $4 maybe. And I can order shirts, spend $400, sell those shirts for $25, go to a convention. But again, I now have to actually work. Versus Redbubble will give me $3.50 a shirt. They handle all the packaging, they handle all the financing. And you might say, oh, but Andrew, you're giving up, $222 or $21.50. And I'm like, yeah, you're damn right I am. Because it's passive.
It's time. Time is money.
I don't want to deploy $400 to $500 and then have to sell it, have to market it versus it doing what it needs to do. And then I could just go and spend $80 on Upwork, have some guy build me a design and $80 deployed, put it up there, and then I can pretty much get mugs, anything I want. And then if I do want the ability to do merch and go to a con, I will go make custom, shirts through another site, and I'll do limited runs.
Yeah. I just got mine today, actually.
And so it's very interesting. I think this is one of the things that creators are not getting is that, and this is just my opinion. Look, I haven't created a book, so I may or may not have the clout to truly talk about this.
Yeah.
But I think on a business level, I think I have the clout.
Yeah. So I didn't have to do anything. I don't keep it in my basement. I don't have to package it. I don't have to put it together and mail it out at the post office. So, I mean, different people have different ways of doing things. So, if you are one of those people who prefer to get boxes of product and keep it in your house and then go through you will make more money that way. There's more, you get to keep a bigger cut of the money. You got to put in the work, right? But you have to actually do those things.
Yeah, I mean, and look. I mean, I'll throw this out to you. If I go to a con, I have a T-shirt. I'll show what my T-shirt looks like. Everybody, this is my Redbubble T-shirt. So I have that shirt. I don't always eat tacos, but when I do, it's at Londo Bell. It's a Gundam T-shirt. Gundam is big right now. Gundam's only getting bigger. That shirt is a good shirt. It hasn't done the way I wanted it to do yet, but it exists. And at some point, when I'm hoping for, somebody's like, "Oh, that's a great shirt." Or if I go to a Gundam con, and there are some, or MechaCon down in Florida, I might just get 3 types of those shirts. I might just go down as a shirt vendor, and I guarantee you that I will clean house. I will clean house, and it'll be crazy but I'm gonna have more, and I'm having more stuff coming in that regard.
Sure.
I like to combine food and Gundam together. That's my thing. Hey, I got a Char shirt coming. Oh, it's epic. It's a really good one. It's coming in probably in the next 2 months. But it's probably going to come in actually 2023. I might drop it like mid-January. So because the goal is like every quarter just to release a new shirt. But again, if I want exclusivity, I will print a limited 100 print run on like a weird shirt color that won't be on Redbubble, or I'll take that off of Redbubble, and now those shirts are limited and I get exclusivity. But those shirts will be like $35.
Yeah, and just like if you go to a concert and there's guys out in the parking lot selling T-shirts, that makes sense. If you're going to be someplace where you're face to face, like at a Comic-Con or something like that, take a box of shirts. Absolutely, go to a T-shirt maker, get a whole bunch of them made, and sell them like hotcakes. But if you're not going to a con and you're doing a lot of stuff online, Redbubble.
For those who don't know, with Redbubble, it's non-exclusive. So you could be on Teesprings, you could be on Pro Wrestling Tees. I have a Pro Wrestling Tees shop. I'm on Pro Wrestling Tees. I'm on Redbubble. There's no exclusivity. And so that's the other thing too, is that you don't know where things are going to go. And I think this is, again, the idea is that if you're a creator, I think people think of themselves only as comic creators. And I don't think that they realize that you need to be beyond that at this point, where making money in comics is not making money in comics. And I think it drives me crazy because I look at all these things like people talking about being sustainable in comics. Well, if you want to be sustainable in comics, you need to understand how to market and brand yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's hard, right? It's when you spend a lot of time creating, itself takes a lot of time. So when you spend a lot of time creating, like you said before, there's only a certain amount of time in the day to do things. So you kind of have to pick and choose wisely what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, all that stuff, including the marketing and the promotions and the T-shirts and all that. It all comes out of your day.
I also think that unfortunately the divide is both growing and shrinking, where comics in the last 5 years has become a hell of a lot easier to produce, and it's been a hell of a lot easier and cheaper. 1 second. So. Sorry about that, everybody. My dog's barking. She knows she's in trouble. But anyway, comics have become cheaper and easier to produce, but it's also opened up the floodgates, I feel, which means that there's more competition. There's also, I hate to say it this way, but there's less money now in comics, and not because there's not a bigger audience, and there's just more people who are taking a piece of that money. Where if there's 100 people and there's only 90 people who could get every project, now if you have 150, well, that means that 60 projects are, going. People say, well, people and me have had this discussion, and they've said, well, if you back Dan's book, you're not going to back Andrew's book. And people, when I've had this discussion, said, well, if they like Andrew's book and they like Dan's book and they're different, or even if they're similar, The people who are going to back Dan's book and Andrew's book are going to back both. But that's not true either, because I don't know about you, but I'm on a fixed budget every month. If that and it has nothing to do with not having a good job or fixed income. It's just that I have X amount of money for entertainment every single month.
Sure.
And so
Yep.
if there's 6 books that are great, but I can only get 2 of them, that doesn't mean the other 4 isn't what I want to buy. It means that I have to make that choice. I can't get all 6. And I think that's the issue. And I think it has nothing to do with, somebody having a bad book, because it's happened.
Yeah. Which I feel is the importance of selling outside of Kickstarter. Kickstarters are great. Indiegogo's crowdfunding is great if you're trying to get that initial push to get it out there. But you have to be able to sell it other places, like have a store or a website or some other place, because exactly to your point, not everybody is going to spend, $1,000 on Kickstarters, in a given time frame. So if you can sell it other places, maybe they don't pick it up on a Kickstarter. Maybe they get it somewhere else.
Or even just offering it in time wise. I'll give you an example. I just had Pat Shand on, and he did Prison Witch. So sometimes somebody might have missed the Prison Witch Volume 3 because maybe there were 6 other Kickstarters going on. Maybe they were having a rough month. Maybe they were maxed out on their entertainment. Guess what? You could go get the $6 trading card tier with Pat's book, Destiny New York, and you could add on Prison Witch. Yes. Because sometimes it's not even the Kickstarter problem. Sometimes it's just the timing. Right now, I'm in a position where I have money because I have a job now. But 3 months ago, I didn't have a job. So I wasn't going to go and back somebody's Kickstarter I wanted, or I had a little bit of money. I was selling stuff on eBay, but I had to make choices. Now I still have to make choices, but I can afford to go back Destiny New York. Fast forward, if I didn't have my job, I wouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Because, and then let's say that 2 months after this, I would have gotten something and he ran something, had all 6 books of Destiny New York, I might have picked it up because it's just timing because of cash flow. And I think that's the other thing too that people don't understand is that sometimes it's not even the idea that there's 4 good projects and somebody just doesn't have the money for all 4. They want all 4, but if you offer me, project 2 in 2 months from now, there you go. Or Christmas is coming up and I know I have expensive bills. So guess what? I'm probably not going to be backing too many big campaigns coming up because I got to take care of Christmas. That's coming in December. Right. So after this Pat Shand Kickstarter, I'm probably going to be taking a break till January, February, because so now if you have a great book in November, sorry, I guess. But if you offer it to me in April, I'm past massive expenditure, I might be a buyer.
Yeah. And I've seen creators these days now doing that, where they offer, if they're doing like a monthly, not a monthly, but like a serial book like that, they'll do the add-ons now. I'm sure you've seen it too, right? And say, here's issue 3, we're on issue 3, but as an add-on, you can get 1 and 2 or something like that. So it gives people the opportunity to catch up. But it's still dependent on the platform, Indiegogo or Kickstarter or whatever it is, for people to catch that when it's going out, as opposed to a standalone store, a website, or whatever it is, where regardless of if you're running a crowdfunding, anyone can just go there, find it, and buy your stuff.
Yeah, and even going outside of that too. I mean, obviously, when you're running a Shopify store, or you're running another type of store. I mean, I think that that's just as important, and I think there are real advantages to that. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out too. I mean, look, I don't have a Shopify store. I run on eBay, and the only reason why is that it's just easier for me. It's just easier. I could go do a website, but then I gotta go market it. I gotta go put in all that effort versus I can just shoot out my eBay link. And a lot of the stuff that I'm selling on eBay is just direct traffic, and almost with internal traffic drives my business on eBay because it's the merchandise that's driving it versus the store.
Yep.
which is what I want. I mean, that's the way my business is set up, which is different than when you're producing a comic. It's really the comic and you that are the driver versus other people's merchandise. But it's super interesting, and obviously, I don't disagree. I don't disagree that it is up very much to a fan to catch that stuff, and when people are running.
Yep.
But I do want to back out of all this. I know that your book's up right now for sale heavily. I know that's coming. I'm going to give you a chance to promote that. But obviously, I do want to back out of your book and talk a little bit about horror comics in general.
Sure.
Because, again, I'm a little bit into horror comics. I think they're interesting. I think that they have gone through a very interesting, I guess, resurgence in the last 3-4 years. I think DC Comics with Deceased did a very nice job with what they were doing. I think Something is Killing the Children is very interesting. I think, obviously Boom is hitting, an itch. And I'm curious how you feel about horror comics, because while I still see things doing well in that area, I also say to myself, it's hard to scare people now. Beyond the obvious things. I mean, if you have a kid and your kid gets kidnapped, you're terrified. But that's not really horror. That to me is natural fear.
Sure.
To make somebody really scared, because there's a difference between being fearful, creeped out, disturbed, right, and then being terrified, I guess, or horrified. So, I mean, if you watch true crime and you watch a heinous crime or disappearance cases, that shit freaks you out. And that's scary. And that's terrifying. I mean, I was watching a case about the two girls who went missing in Panama. That case, that case, it makes your hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And if you don't believe me, go watch that thing. And you're like, oof.
Yeah.
I think it is. Ooh, if you don't know that case is creepy.
There's that's a big difference, right? Is real, I guess, horror is hopefully the stuff that sticks with you afterwards. That's what makes it scary. Is like when you're done with it and you stop watching it or you put it down, you keep thinking about it and it bugs you when you go out to get that bottle of water in the middle of the night or whatever it is, right? You think about that stuff.
No. That case made me not want to leave the U.S. anytime soon.
Right. You don't want to do that, so it's stuck with you. So that's terrifying. Absolutely.
That case. If you don't know what that case is about, the basic premise for those who want to know what it's about, because I'm sure, is that there's these two girls who went to Panama and were going to spend, I think, a month or two or maybe even 4 months teaching. They arrived into Panama about a week early, and they go exploring. And there's this trail. And they just kept going, walking on it. Now it gets creepy, right? They're not heard of on day 1. Day 2, 19 days in, they're not heard about. Their backpack disappeared. There's pictures of them up to a certain point, and then there's all these weird pictures. There's 4 or 5 weird pictures. Then there's 2 519s. But one of them is missing. And the only way to get that one off and can't be recovered is that it had to be manually wiped. Now their backpack appears clean as fuck. Folded up, no money's missing. And then basically their bones are found.
Oh, wow.
But there's all these weird photos. There's photos of abrasions on them. There's weird shit out there. There's photos of supposedly of them one of them tied up. It is disturbing as fuck. We all know what happened. They were killed by a gang or by the Panama military. That's it. There's none other. And this is why you don't go into the jungle in Panama alone or with somebody. And if you go into the jungle, you better have an army. You should call up Blackwater to go with you into the Panama jungle. And there you go. But anyway,
yeah.
Getting back to the point of all that, what is this like for you in that entire realm? Because horror is a very tricky entity, I feel.
It is, and it's really funny because I feel like a lot of people like to make horror stories, but there isn't the same number of people who want to read horror stories. And I don't understand the phenomenon. People love to make it, but there's fewer people who read it. Um, Luckily, with the diversity in the publishing world and comic book publishing, right? So there's more than just Marvel and DC, of course. So those types of stories, I think, have more of a platform to get out there, especially with things like Image, where it's creator owned. They just, if the book looks decent, it can get out there. Some of the other smaller publishers, same thing, where they can just put out these books. So I think you were mentioning before about trends and things like that. So I think this is one of those trends that's kind of hot right now, is the horror books. But they still haven't, I don't think, made quite the splash that traditional like superhero stories still continue to make. They're interesting. I think they offer a lot as far as like food for thought kind of things. Exactly what you're talking about. Like, who's going to want to now go into the jungle in Panama? Like, it's something to talk about with your friends,
that
right?
Case freaks me out to this day. I read about it, and like I've read a lot about it. I mean, if there was ever a comic book, this is it.
Yeah,
this is it. I mean, I was like, it's creepy. It's creepy. It's almost as creepy as the fake SWAT officer in a church who killed like Missy Beavers. That's also creepy for a different reason. That's still unsolved. And that's in America. That's scary because supposedly they think that was a woman killing another woman dressed as a fake cop in a church. You want to write a horror book. That's the book to write.
A lot of times reality is worse than things that we can come up with in our imaginations, right? The things that people do.
That's a creepy story too. But again, I mean, it's there's some creepy stuff out there. There's some weird stuff out there, and oh my God, it's not like my friend Sam Carter's book. Final Boy doesn't creep me out. Final Boy is a little weird. It's violent. It unnerves you a little bit. But man, freaking Coffee House Crime.
Yeah.
Right? He does on his YouTube channel. Oof. That's some creepy stuff right there. And I just looked over at my window to make sure nobody's watching me. It's not clearly. But anyhow. Yeah, so I don't know. Like for me, it's weird because I'm a semi horror reader, but I'm not a big one. But I do appreciate like true crime, and I appreciate that realm because I think that stuff is like rooted in reality. Like I don't like the stuff that sort of goes supernatural and tries to terrify me because that to me doesn't get me. Like I can't buy into something that can't be real. Like if you have like Avatar, right? Like the movie Avatar, like that to me. If they turn that into a horror flick, I'd be like, oh, I can't really buy into it, right? But if you're talking about people missing in the Panama jungle, and then it's to search for them, and then there's a lot of other stuff going on. Well, now, but is that horror still, or is that thriller? And this is where I get so confused because it's tricky.
Yeah, and I think especially with comic books, because it is a visual medium, and there's the writing element also very prevalent there. It's really hard to make a real horror story. I think to what you were saying. Yeah, you see everything. You can't get things like jump scares going, or like those tricks to scare people. So it really has to do more with suspense and dread. Is where I think you can leverage comic books, is things like that, as opposed to what you might see in a movie that requires you to see an action or to those types of things. So it's more to do with like the macabre or kind of like that EC comic type thing where there's skeletons, you marry a skeleton kind of stuff, which is I guess technically horror, but you're not scared necessarily. It's not scaring you like a
Yeah.
trip to the Panama jungle would.
The Panama jungle thing just freaked me out.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's horror as much as it's you're dealing with the idea of evil.
Yeah.
It,
Well, the
it,
root word in horror is, it comes from horrific, right? We're talking about horrific things. It doesn't necessarily have to be ghosts or monsters or whatever. It's just something that just
the
offends your senses as being terrible. That's kind
the
of what
last
horror is.
the last good horror book I read was Anthony Bourdain's Hungry Ghosts, and the premise of that, what?
What is that? I've never heard of that. He wrote a book, a
He's
horror
written a
book.
lot of graphic novels. You didn't know that?
I thought he was like a documentary biographer, autobiography
He
kind of
is
writer.
a chef who's like
Yes.
a documentary type of guy, and then I mean he had a show like Dangerous Parts of
Right. Right.
Anthony Bourdain. Like, great, interesting show.
Okay.
Now thing about him is that the reason why he got killed is because he was speaking ill about Hillary Clinton. We all know that to be true. Best with the Clintons, you're done. Yeah, there's a list of people that I would recommend that you ask, but they're no longer with us. That's not a political joke, by the way. That's just a joke. That's not a Democrat Republican joke either. That's a joke. Clearly. I'm sorry. There's somebody at my door with a gun. Do you mind if I take that? It's terrible. Don't worry. My wallet will still be in my pants. Anyway, that's another joke from like 2016. Terrible. Oh my god, I am full of them today. Again though, you I mean that's a Bernie Sanders joke right there. Anyway, enough about that.
So the Anthony Bourdain book, what was this about?
So it's called Hungry Ghosts, and it's an anthology, and they're playing 100 Candles, and the whole point of that is each story that these chefs are playing after a meal is more terrifying than the one before it. And that book, it wasn't scary in the realm of terrifying, but that the intensity is lifting up and going further and further into it, and they're playing the game 100 Candles. For those who don't know, 100 Candles is a game where you have a room full of 100 candles. Everybody tells a ghost story, and then you tell a story, you go into the room, you blow out, and then you look into a mirror. And if you see a demon, well, you're going to die, is the premise. And so basically the goal is that who's the one last left standing is, sort of the master, I guess, of it. And everybody goes around, and then you go around and people slowly chicken out and retire. And 7-8 stories, brilliant book. It was his last book before he died. And very, very, very interesting book because, it's called Hungry Ghosts because, well, people are playing are interesting, to say the least. And yes. So a very, very, very interesting book. Wasn't even that expensive. It was like a $15 hardcover book. Pretty reasonably priced. I still think it's pretty reasonably priced. But again, it was sort of terrifying because you're like, okay, we're now playing this game and everything is being raised up a notch with each story. And how far does this go? And how horrific do we go to?
Sure.
And a brilliant concept because it's an anthology with a bunch of different creators, but it's all the same writer. There was Anthony Bourdain and then his writing partner basically worked together with all these top creators, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Well, I'm gonna have to look for that.
It's almost as good as his ramen fighting book. That was an awesome book.
I don't know what that is.
He basically wrote a almost manga comic type book of like a ramen, guy who's a ramen person, but like he's also like an excellent martial artist, and like people are after him, and he's like defending things, and he's doing it was brilliant. It's so brilliant. Like it might be like sous chef something, and it's brilliant. It's so good, and it sounds so stupid on its surface, and it's so good, and it's so stupid, but it's so intelligent. And I'm just like, fuck. I'm like, this is gonna be either really bad or really good. I'm like, fucking Christ, this is brilliant. And I'm like, I want like 9 more of them. Like, he's not alive, and I'm like, fuck. Oh, it's just terrible. It's just terrible.
See, there are still some original ideas out there.
It's almost as good as my friend Dashel. He does Shotgun Samurai. Think about that, right? Tell me what I said to him after my first interview with him. I said, dude, just make a fucking B movie, man. You're gonna make so much money off of this B movie that you don't even need. You need like $2 million. Like I could find him $2 million and raise him $2 million on like junk bonds with seconds. The people who will invest will get like a 300% rate of return in legit like 18 months on their junk bonds. It'll be insane. Like, you could probably make the movie for like 200,000 if you really wanted to.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be bad enough that it's good.
Bad movies are very popular. People love bad movies.
Make so much money. It'll be so stupid how much money he'll make because everybody will buy it and be like, I knew this thing was going to be rough. The fact that I bought it for $7 digitally, and now me and my friends are going to be watching this at least 4 or 5 times a year after we get home from the liquor store. Oh, it is. But I digress. So I do want to let you get out of here in a second because we've been speaking, and I definitely got us canceled. Definitely, I got us canceled here for sure. Because people don't want to hear that making comics is tough. They don't want to hear that this is difficult. They don't want to hear that making money in comics is hard, and that you got to put in the hard work. But I am curious because I know you ran a Kickstarter for this book, but then I don't think you've been back to Kickstarter, or have you? Directly, I want to say.
Not directly, no. I've been a part of other projects, contributed either as an artist or writer or whatever, but not directly. So I'm actually working on my second graphic novel right now. I'm about halfway through, so it should come out next year. And that is not a prequel and not a sequel. It is kind of like we were talking about the Star Wars universe. It's part of this, but it's not dependent on the time frame. So that'll come out next year. So that'll be my second crowdfunding.
Yeah, crowdfunding is hard.
Yeah.
I had a rough go at it. I had a very rough go at it. And some people are nice and some people are horrible people on Kickstarter and in the comic realm.
I mean, hey, it's people, right? Anytime you put like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people together, there's bound to be some bad seeds. It just happens.
What I learned very quickly is that some people get it, some people don't. Some people, and I'm seeing it right now, and I'm curious your take on it. And again, this is the part where we get canceled, is that I am now starting to see certain people understand how to ask for media, build relationships, and don't have a media problem when they want to get their book out there. And I'm also seeing a bunch of people who do have that problem, and they don't understand the R word, relationships. There's a lot of R words, and I like using a lot of R words. Royalty is a good word. I love using words here. But I think, I'm starting to see that people are shooting out on Twitter and on Facebook, hey, who has a show and they want me on? And it's like, but the reason why I'm not biting at those people is that I have legitimately a bunch of spots open, but I'm like, you don't say hello to me. You don't like my content. Why do I want you? Not you, but like all these people. I'm like, and then they hit me up and I'm like, oh, what are you bringing to my show? So I think that it's very interesting with what's going on. And that's just how I view Kickstarter, is that I think it's fascinating that people attack, you know, a podcaster on Kickstarter, and yet a lot of these people need the media, and then they're like, I don't really get asked for interviews, and I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't attack the guy because you don't think that I don't speak to other podcasters and we don't have conversations. I mean, really, did you not think that this doesn't get around that you attacked another interviewer directly and indirectly? Yeah, no offense to anybody in comics, but it's a very small world.
Yeah, I mean, it's a personal philosophy of mine to try to stay positive and not trash other people's stuff ever, because there's no good that comes out of it.
There are exceptions, public exceptions. I mean.
Yep.
We can trash J. Scott Campbell all we want. I mean, that 601 cover. God, what a shame. I mean, what a horrible human being he was. I mean,
well, that's something people say all the time about this, specifically about this independent comic book area space that, we're dabbling in is it's a lot of relationships. It's a very small pool, relatively speaking, of people. So, people talk and word gets around. So, like I said, just best to be positive and try to stay on the good side.
Also, I think one of the biggest problems, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that you need to build relationships outside of indie comics. This is one of the things that I think a lot of creators are now starting to realize, is that I don't have a comic. You need to build a relationship with me. I am not in the quote unquote indie circle.
Yep.
But guess what? Everybody needs media, and this media stays up forever and it converts. And so if you're doing 100 media appearances every single year, after 10 years, you have 1,000 media appearances. And if all that stuff's on YouTube, when somebody Googles your name, it's going to pop up. Whether it's this show or somebody else's show, this show helped that trigger on YouTube. And mine might be number 900 on the list. But guess what? If you didn't do those 900 or 1,000 interviews, it wouldn't have triggered. So I think that that's something that people have to understand. But I digress. I do want to ask you one more question before I give you a chance to self-promote. And I am curious how you are seeing cons and where you see cons going, because this is a very tricky issue right now. I don't know how New York Comic Con went. I actually didn't bother to look at any news on it. It actually did not pique my interest at all this year. Conventions, I've been out of the loop for almost 3 years now. I haven't been to a con. I don't know if I have a desire ever to go back. I personally do not see the point, because I am getting about 85% what I want by sitting in my house, which is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
I haven't been to a con in a very long time. Of course, COVID aside, even before that, I did go to New York Comic Con when it was, geez, this is go back years, when it was first created, and I enjoyed it. I'll admit that. It's quite a spectacle. It's cool to walk around the floor and see all the different stuff. I'm not saying anything new when I say that it's not really a comic convention anymore. It's really just
a pop culture.
It's a pop culture thing. So you can get toys, you can get collectibles, you can get statues, you can get
mugs. You
there's you get that too. So there's so much stuff that goes into those things. As far as like where they're going in the future, I mean, kind of like I would guess the same way that the comic stores have gone is that what you were saying before about diversification, right? A comic store isn't just about comic books. It's about card games. It's about RPGs. It's like so much stuff now.
Pop Funkos.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, comic conventions are kind of the same thing. The comic side of it seems to have been fading away, at least for the very big ones.
Look at Hot Topic.
And it's everything else.
I'm going to ask you a question about Hot Topic. So, when you think of Hot Topic, what do you think about?
That's a very specific time frame. Hot Topic, the store?
I'm going to throw a word out, and it's going to be slightly offensive to some people. I think of that goth music type of vibe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Sort of alternative culture, if you will.
Yep. That's what it
Now,
services. Yep.
that's what Hot Topic when I was growing up. I'm 29, so I think I'm a little bit younger than you are. But I think that relatively our generations, if we're not in the same generation, we're pretty close to it. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, a little bit wrong.
No.
I'm like a vampire. I go way back.
No. But when Hot Topic was coming up, you
Yeah.
saw it when you're passing the mall, and you're like, okay, this is alternative culture, right? And
Yeah.
I was one of those guys, and I'm like, man, they got anime shirts, they got wrestling shirts, they got
Yeah.
music shirts. Like all those kids in high school wearing Aeropostale, because I'm 29. All those kids weren't wearing what I was wearing, right? And I wasn't one of those goth kids in high school, but I was one of those guys where I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna wear some music band I like.
Right.
I'm gonna wear an anime T-shirt, and I thought it was alternative culture. And now I go to Hot Topic, and every anime weeboo's in that store. It's Pop Funkos. It's still music and that stuff, but all the goth shit got out of Hot Topic. All the alternative culture is out of Hot Topic beyond the anime stuff and the wrestling stuff. It's cool. Now,
that's interesting.
What?
That's interesting. I haven't been there in a long time, so to hear that they changed their merchandise is curious.
But like now, you go into Hot Topic, the football quarterback and the nerd who's going to be a computer science major who plays with Legos and a girl doesn't want to talk to him are standing next to each other talking about Pop Funkos and Hot Topic. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I'm in Hot Topic, and I look like the nerd, and but I also look like I'm functioning. It's weird, and so like that's how I think Comic-Con has become. Is that it used to be alternative culture, and now it's mainstream.
Yeah, I don't have a perspective really on if that's good or bad. It's just things over time, things change and they evolve. So if it brings people together, that's a good thing. But if you're a kind of more of a comic book purist and you like your conventions to be comic booky, you kind of have to look for that now. The smaller conventions are the more comic booky ones, whereas the larger popular ones are the ones where it's everything. It's all pop culture.
It's very much like an anime con. It's not excluding comics, but it's definitely anime.
And I'd love to hear from people if people who sell at those things, like other creators and stuff like that, if they find a lot of their sales come from the smaller conventions that are more comic booky, or do they make good sales at the large conventions or better sales at those ones? That would be curious to me.
I don't know anything about it from that, but what I hear is that it depends on the con. So I think New York Comic Con is tricky, but I also think that like Merc Mag was in New York Comic Con and they probably did well, but they're also not indie. When you do 100,000 on Kickstarter, you're not indie anymore.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. But then again, you can make the argument that Pat Shand did 100,000 with one of his books, but his books usually do about 35 to 40. But even still, I mean, he had a runaway book. So you could have a runaway book. But with Destiny New York, he's going to probably do about 35,000, which is it's
really
upper
good.
echelon indie.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Pat Shand has been doing this forever. So, but my point is that, even still though, I consider that to be indie. But if you're doing 100,000 in every single one of your campaigns, or even doing like 80,000, you're not indie anymore. You're not mainstream, but you're small publishing, you're small press.
Yeah, okay.
Versus indie, where I view indie as that you're at like because I think there's small publishing or small press is above indie, because again now you're a press house. If you run 6 campaigns doing 100,000 every year, you are a small press house. If you're doing 5 campaigns that do 30,000 a year, you're indie comics. And that there's no science to it, and that's all anecdotal, but that's just how I view it.
Yep.
But I digress. Enough. Again, I'm going to get us both in trouble. And I'm supposed to be on a phone call with Apple today. So clearly. So anyway, I do want to show you this cop thing eventually. And I'm probably going to show you after we're off. This is going to freak you the fuck out. Like, that thing scared the shit out of me. If I ever see somebody in a church in a fake sweater, ooh, I'm ducking out.
Don't be there. Don't stay there.
I'm going to let you promote yourself. So where could people find you, bother you, hit you up, disturb you, yell at you, call you at 4 a.m, order you a pizza or whatnot?
Yeah, that would be great. Please do that. Yeah, so go get my book, Worms Crawl In. You can go to my website, wormscrawlin.com. It connects to my Big Cartel store, so you can purchase through PayPal or credit card. It's all secure. I don't see anything, so you can do that. On Facebook, just search for Worms Crawl In. I have a page for Worms Crawl In, so you can go there and get all the latest news and things that are happening. On Instagram, I am at Dan_Schmidt_art, which is in my my name tag there. And then, of course, Redbubble, right? I just started the merchandise. So I have shirts, I have, like blankets, there's a pillow. So you can go to Redbubble and just search for Worms Crawl In, and you can get that stuff. I actually got a couple of sweatshirts myself to see the quality. And my wife got a blanket, a giant, like a 6 by 8 foot blanket or something like that of the cover of my book. So if you haven't read the book, just go get a blanket with a cool picture on it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep saying it. One of the things is that you have to support what you enjoy, what you like seeing. If you want to see more of it, well, it's not enough to just give it a like on Facebook, a heart on Twitter, a heart on Instagram. You actually have to go out and spend money and buy it, and then tell people that you bought it, because without money, this stuff doesn't get made, directly and indirectly. So that's one of the things that I'm really trying to get people to understand. And look, obviously, Dan is a little bit biased about his book, but I personally do not care. If you support Dan's book, you support this show, you support something that you like, as long as you're supporting something that you enjoy, that's really what counts, I think, in the long run. Obviously, as I stated, I'm biased because I would like you to support my show, everybody. But if you do not find value in anything, then you should not support it, but you should support something that you do find value in. Otherwise, it doesn't get made, and it just creates a cycle where it will slowly dwindle away. So just keep that in mind, that if you want things to continue, you got to show support, and you got to actually put your money where your mouth is. Furthermore, obviously, all of his links are up there. I put his link to his website, and I'm sure that will direct you to a variety of places that if you want to buy this, or if you want to go to Redbubble, or if you don't know where to go to, he just mentioned a lot of his social media, so I'm sure it's up there as well. So go check that out. As far as I'm concerned, obviously all my social media is down below: Pop Anime Comics, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. If you're not already subscribed on YouTube, please do so. It does make a big difference. If you are not liking the Facebook page or the independent group on Facebook, Indie Comic Connect, we accept a lot of people into that group. It's free to join. The only reason why it's private is because, unfortunately, you got to keep out some trolls. It's just the way it is. And I do, towards the end of this month, which is approaching relatively quickly, I do have a comic book investment system class coming. It is a hell of a class. It's going to be on Udemy first. Might be some other places. It's about $40 for about 18 to 22 hours of my time. So if you want to learn or realize that this is not for you, comic book investing, that's probably the best place to start. So check all that stuff out. I appreciate everybody. I also have Buy Me a Coffee if anybody's interested. Feel free to hit that up as well. It is not necessary, but again, if you like what I talk about, feel free to hit it up and feel free to support me. Other than that, that's pretty much it. And I'm going to give you the final word.
I like what you said. Go support the artist you like. That's unless you want to be inundated with corporate stuff, artists are the ones out there trying to make the content that everyone enjoys. So go support your artists.
And I think that is a perfect place to end, everybody. And that is a wrap.